Okay, let's do it. Welcome to the March 20th, 2023 meeting in the Yarmouth Board of Health. And just to let you know, once again, this is a hybrid meeting, which means that someone could be here, obviously present for the meeting, or at home be watching and even participate. There are instructions on the website of how to connect here. As for attendance, I'm Hillard Bosky, one of the members of the board, and then I'll just ask everyone to raise their hand and say they're present. Mary?
Present.
Thank you. Charlie?
Present.
Very good. Eric? Eric? He's zooming. He was going to zoom in. I know that.
He's muted.
Yeah, okay. Got a signal. He's watching.
Is he muted or?
Well, we do have quorum anyway. It appears Eric is trying to connect with us or vice versa. I don't know. Meanwhile, as we know, Deborah has stepped down and Jay, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay.
And Erica is with us as well.
Okay. That's it there. Next item would be public comment. If there's anyone here or at home zooming in, they have any comments, this would be a good time to come before us. Questions, answers, comments, anything. Okay, Eric, you raise your hand and say I'm present.
Hey, I'm present. Sorry, some technical difficulties there.
Okay, nice to have you. That's perfect. So, anyone? Not. I know there were some changes for the agenda. We're still on number 2 for tobacco sales.
We are.
Okay, so this is a discussion listed here, FDA tobacco sales compliance check / violation. And the first one is Moonshine Liquors. They're located to 931 Route 28 in South Yarmouth. Is there anyone from that business? Okay, just have a seat. Yeah, great. Just introduce yourself.
Steve Jamoulis, Moonshine Liquors.
Okay, so just to let you know, the Board of Health received a letter. And that's in the looks like the Massachusetts Health Officers Association. We'll explain what's going on a little bit with that, which I'm sure you know some of it, but this is so the public.
Yes, I got a letter. I received the letter.
This is a letter to us. And basically, the Massachusetts Tobacco Cessation and Prevention Program recently conducted a tobacco retail inspection / compliance check. And that's part of the FDA, or the Federal Drug Administration, contract with the state. And the FDA has determined that the following vendor, and that's you, have had a violation of the Family Smoking Prevention Tobacco Control Act. And that's what this board received, this letter. So we're here tonight just to inform you in case for some reason you didn't know that. Also, it's noted here that there's free online training for you or any of your employees. Okay, that's there to learn about screening people and just about selling tobacco in our town. Now, Jay, anything on this that?
Well, I would just, Mr. Chairman, just so that the board understands that this compliance check was an FDA compliance check outside the margins of what the board enforced, the jurisdiction and authority of the Yarmouth tobacco regulations and the state regulations that you enforce on a regular basis. And that program is enforced through the Barnstable Tobacco Control Program. This was an FDA compliance check. Still the same severity and public health consequences, but there would be no penalty, punitive suspension, fine of any sorts. But it's important that because they are holders of a license within the town of Yarmouth, that they come to the board and explain as far as how was there a sale to a youth and really in a violation of the tobacco control regulations for the town.
Yeah, that's to an individual who's less than 21, basically. So there must have been a sale there. And it looks like it happened on January 6th. So this board would like to know from you is what happened and what can you do in the future to prevent this from occurring?
Well, since the last time I was here, which wasn't that long ago, I swore I wouldn't be in this seat again and that I was gonna take action so this would not happen again. Unfortunately, the local sting took place on December 30th. And by the time this FDA sting took place a week later on the same day, on a Friday, a week later, I was not aware of the local one. And even after the federal one, I was not, or state, I don't know, FDA, I was not aware of either one at the time. And it was the same person
Right.
both days, and a week apart. Like I said, I wasn't even aware to take any kind of action. I've taken a lot of action since then. I posted signs and I know you guys, you people say that you can post all the signs you want and it won't help. I talk to them on a daily basis. I posted dates for alcohol and tobacco sales every day on their registers. And I text them if I'm not there to remind them. I don't know what, like I said, it happened the same week. On the same day when the same girl was working. She's no longer with us. And unfortunately, I was not aware of either one to take any action at the time. I mean, I wasn't slack on it, but not as strict as I am now, because like I said, I swore I was not going to be in this position again. And all too soon, here I am. So my wife, my boys and myself were devastated when we heard about it. And we take it very serious.
Sure.
Without a tobacco license, the liquor license will suffer as well. So, because people expect to get both while they're in there. So-
Comments? Charlie, Mary, Eric?
I'm curious, how often does the Massachusetts Health Officers Association do this
This is,
type of?
yeah, this is the first time. This is again, outside the program that we contract with Barnstable. So I don't know the frequency, intervals of inspections.
Now, when you say FDA, is this a federal compliance check or a state?
It's administered by the Health Office Association, but they are going under the rules and regulations of the FDA. Right,
Under a contract with
a
the state?
contractor, right.
I just didn't know
And-
if a third state one was
N-
coming.
No, the rules the same, but sir, I appreciate your words on your severity of the severity, the understanding of the severity and your understanding of how important this is to your business, your livelihood and your employees. Actually, if this had been in place under the Barnstable inspection program, there's a $5,000 fine. You've had the $1,000 fine, it would be a $5,000 fine. It doesn't get much more severe, but this is now at a very high level. In 1964, the warning level was the Surgeon General Luther Terry put the warning labels on cigarettes. And incrementally, public health has worked to enforce that, understanding the science is clear. Sales of tobacco, it's addictive, right? And the minors who the problem with smoking is starting, and those rules are in place. So that hopefully you can educate your staff. You seem to understand it very, very well, and it's education and engagement with your employees. There can be zero defect. Every sale, it doesn't matter what the line is at the counter. Every sale has to be exactly precise. So I so appreciate you being here and you understand it. I just want you to know what those consequences could be. Fortunately, when the board is not in the situation to do that, and you're not in a situation to have to write that check, but that could in fact be the case.
Well, for instance, not that long, just recently, I was standing at the counter with one of my employees and she ID'd the person and the person left. And she turned to me and said, CIID. I said, I'm right next to you. But if I was out back taking a delivery, would you have ID'd?
Right.
again, like the last meeting, I said, I'm at the mercy of them.
I know, and the board has said many times they understand the struggle and the difficulty for retaining employees and recruiting employees. That is part of the equation as well, well understood. And this board has been nothing but cooperative and tried to understand and educate. If you said, listen, I think a training for us to come out and do a training, Barnstable program is very willing to do that. So we want to be a partnership in this. This isn't a combative, this is a partnership.
Do your employees understand the consequences for you and your business?
Well, I think they do now. I think they do now. Just the fact that I had to come here again so soon. Also, we have recently updated we have a I don't know what you call it, a machine or a compliance.
Yeah.
Mostly for out-of-state IDs and things. And one of my employees wanted to try it. So she asked for an ID, took the ID, put it in the machine. I said, wait a minute. You didn't even look at the ID. You didn't even look at it. That could have been my ID.
Right.
You gotta still do the whole, look at the person, check his height, check his age.
Yeah.
And then put it in to see if it's a good ID. So it's just very difficult, but I'm gonna work so hard at it.
Yeah.
Like I said, we have to.
Right. Yeah.
Repetition helps,
What is it? I'm sorry.
repetition helps, in other
Oh,
words.
I'm not letting up.
Yeah,
I can't.
yeah, it's not only writing big checks. I mean, license can be suspended, revoked. I mean, this is big stuff.
Especially with the summer season coming, it's gonna get so crazy.
Yeah.
Best I can. I apologize to the board for being here so 2 times so quick. Like I said, I swore I wouldn't be here again, but here I am.
Well, I appreciate your
Need to
coming
laugh.
in,
I'm not laughing, I'm just,
but I may have said it last time, we really don't want to see you. So,
I don't see you guys either.
thank you for coming in.
Okay.
If a training is helpful, please reach out.
Yeah, I would like, how would I do that?
Why don't you contact the office? We can help you in that.
Yeah,
It might
Board of
help.
Health?
We would come to it wouldn't be here in this building. It would come to your
No.
facility and help you through that process. And it may also drive home the message of the severity and the importance
No,
of that.
would
So,
be very helpful.
so please feel that's an open invitation to any.
My own compliance checks, but.
Yep.
Honestly, I don't know anybody 18 under 20.
Right.
I
But-
really don't.
Appreciate you being here.
Send them in.
Right.
The only issue, I have one issue with the way the compliance checks are done. They say they're supervised. How are they supervised? Someone stays outside?
There, yeah, right. There is someone in the car that is driving the,
And they send an
youth.
18-year-old in?
Right.
So how? Okay, I got a little problem with that, but that's not my thing. I mean, if they come in and not ask for an ID, they could possibly get 3 packs of cigarettes and keep 2 in their pocket. So actually, that might be a problem.
No, so they used to call these sting operations. These are educational enforcement. They're only given a certain amount of money. They have to come in and ask. This is a program where it's actually an educational piece for the student as well. They're learning on this as well. So that's not how the
The
program runs.
18-year-old
Well,
sees that
super.
he was able to get cigarettes pretty easy. The 18-year-old that
Right.
came in,
Okay.
that's all right. I mean, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to put a
Right.
stop to this.
And the board has been very supportive and the health staff are here to help as well. So please know that there's an open invitation for that as well.
So I would contact the Board of Health
You can
to,
contact the Board of Health
Come to the
and we can
school.
come up. Yeah, actually, it's a program run out of Barnstable Health and they would come out, Bob Collette, they'd come out and
would very much appreciate
We
that.
want you to be successful, okay?
Sorry,
We want you to be successful, so,
believe me, we bought this business, I left Brockton, which I was there, like I said last time, for 50-something, or 37 years, but 50-something years total. And we were so happy to be doing business on the Cape, finally with my boys, and I almost wish my boys opened a dispensary in Eastham.
Mhm.
I almost wish it was done that way. Because they have to show an ID before they even walk in the door. Then they show an ID to the person in the booth.
Right.
And I almost wish it was done that way, because if it was done that way, with everybody, there wouldn't be one issue.
You could do that. You could do
Sorry?
that yourself.
I know, but if it's not with every store, that's tough. People will not come in. I've already heard, I guess there's one store down the street from me, Water Wheel or something, that gives breathalyzers.
Mhm.
And people come in to me and say, I won't go back there and take a breathalyzer for nothing. That's a little extreme, but better, with the way I just said it with the
Right.
dispensaries, the way they've done it, but
Well, you clearly understand what the motivation and the work that the board is looking to do to educate.
Oh, I
And your cooperation is greatly appreciated.
thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Okay,
Take care.
thank you so much.
Okay, so we have one more here. Let's see, another compliance check. This location is Bucky's Convenience at 1047 Route 28 in South Yarmouth. So if there's someone from the business, please come forward, just introduce yourselves, and we appreciate your coming in.
Thank you, thank you. My name is Madhav Adhikari. Madhav Adhikari from Bucky's Convenience Store, yes.
Thank you. So you were here, I saw that, so you listened to all what I had to say before, and this is the same problem.
Yes,
Selling tobacco to a minor.
yes,
That's why you've ended up here tonight.
yes, it was mistake, there was working and the old lady before he's, and she gave him the cigarettes without asking the ID. That's our mistakes. So now we are going to do who is looks under 40. Now we are asking everybody to take ID right now, which looks under the 40.
That may be tough, maybe easier that, or probably that everyone should get checked pretty much. 40 could be a tough look. Is that required? I certainly would make it higher than 40 years. And don't put so much of,
Who looks under 40, then we ask the ID,
Well,
Even if
I'm-
it's 50, looks like we ask the ID.
This is your internal policy is what
Yes,
you're
no,
saying.
yes, no,
Okay.
we good.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that mistakes again, so we are aware about that.
Yep.
So we asking everybody who looks under 40, so we ask for their ID in every customer right now.
board members.
I think it's difficult, like you were saying, Mr. Chairman. I mean, people look a lot of different ways and people's opinions are subjective. So I mean, I certainly appreciate that approach. But I think that can be really difficult, Oh, I thought they looked under 40. Well, it's not the employee that's going to be held accountable. Unfortunately, it's your business. So I think that's a difficult thing to try to quantify.
Yeah, I agree. You can't afford to be wrong. If a 70-year-old walks in and they're asked for ID, it's a compliment. I don't know what else. Mary, Charlie, what do you think about this? What we're talking about?
It's been a few years since I got carded, but I would say if you're gonna be in that business, you gotta check everybody.
I agree.
Right.
That's right.
I mean, if an employee is willing to risk their job and your license, that's what they need to be willing to risk, I guess, if they decide not to card somebody. And that's, I guess, what they need to understand is they're risking their job and your license, and the livelihood of your families, So and it's a simple thing, but that's what's kind of at risk when someone chooses not to check an ID or to make an assumption, that's all.
What do you think?
No, I'm telling you, who comes in my store, right? Who looks under 40, no, we ask,
Yeah.
we ask them who is, we ask everybody to check the ID right now. So we
It,
told who works over there, we told everybody just check the ID, who looks under 40. Even though we know him, but we check ID every day. So for the same person, right? We don't care right now.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how we are aware that we don't want to do again the
Right.
mistakes. That's why we are every day we talk to our employees, check
Right.
ID, check ID.
right.
So
Well, that's certainly what we would recommend, that everyone gets checked.
yes,
Okay. Anyone else?
I would simply say this, given given the severe consequences
yes,
to your livelihood, a system that you, whatever you come up with, in today's day and age, people are wearing masks, things that further complicates.
when they come, we told them right now can you take out the marks one time?
Right. Right.
We can
Great.
confirm.
Any internal procedures you can do to
Yeah.
eliminate any uncertainty, any ambiguity whatsoever, uncertainty, it has to be, you have to authenticate their age to make sure they are legal to buy. And if you can do that so that you don't have to come back here again. But again, the same offer goes to you and all 29 tobacco establishment or licenses in the town. If you need help in that training, educating your staff, understanding the punitive, the penalties that are in place, $1,000. First offense, $1,000. Second offense, $5,000. They're not writing that check, you are. So if we can help you in that training, reach out to the Board of Health. We will certainly accommodate that. We can come down for staff training. Glad to do that.
We will contact the Board of Health and
We look forward to that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for coming in.
thank you.
And we have a change in the agenda here a little bit.
If
You
you would,
mentioned.
if you could, please, we're going to jump from the Jeff Colby, the DPW director, is here to give a kind of comprehensive overview on the wastewater project that the town is undertaking. But if we could jump to the Aquifund, and Selectman Mark Forrest is actually in County Commissioner as well. If he could come here. Erica, if you could there you go. Thank you.
Mark, just for the minutes and the public, in case someone doesn't recognize you, just tell us who you are.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks.
Good evening. I am Mark Forrest from Indian Memorial Drive, South Yarmouth. And I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen, and I'm also chairman of the Board of County Commissioners for Barnstable County. And what brings me here tonight is, and I appreciate the invitation to come before you this evening. And it's great to know that following me will be Jeff Colby, our DPW director. As you know, the Board of Selectmen, we have been working for years to update and get ready for another opportunity to present to the voters a plan to address wastewater in the town of Yarmouth. And so for the upcoming town meeting in April, our annual town meeting, the last Tuesday of the month, we're going to have a very important article on the agenda or on the warrant. And so one of the reasons why I'm here tonight is not to talk about that. Jeff will cover that. But what I'd like to talk a little bit about is how homeowners can finance any kind of cost associated with upgrading, whether it's a septic system or if they're facing a financial challenge in paying for a hookup to a sewer system. I was elected to the Board of County Commissioners a few years ago, and one of my priorities was to help expand the county's septic system loan fund. It's a program that Barnstable County has offered for years. It's not that well known. Cape-wide, there are about 4,500 households that have taken advantage of it. And what we've been doing is providing low interest loans to homeowners interested in upgrading their septic system, but need financial help to do so. It's a program that has been, I think, pretty widely supported in towns around the Cape. The various health departments have been very active in providing residents with information on how this program works. What we have done at Barnstable County is we have literally rebranded the program and have been able to offer different forms of financial assistance. And we're not done. We're looking to find ways in which we can actually provide grants to very low income homeowners. But essentially what we've done is for the financial assistance that we're offering, if your income is 120% or less of the area median household income, which roughly these days is around $85,000. If you're up to 120% of that number, you are eligible for a 0% loan. Now, that's for that group. And some of you are aware the cost of a septic system these days can be as high as $30,000. So that kind of cost that is incurred can be very significant. For towns that are setting up sewer systems and collection systems, the cost for a hookup can be anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000. And the thing that's particularly challenging on a sewer hookup is oftentimes a homeowner, a resident is not aware of that cost and the desire to hook up. Usually they have some idea with the work happening in a community and when a project is phased, but generally those decisions have to be made, within a year. So the decision for homeowners can be quite significant, and it can also be expensive. So a sewer hookup, an upgrade of a septic system. Now, obviously, we're doing this at a time when, as most people know, the Department of Environmental Protection is in the process of revising their rules and regulations. It is our hope in the town of Yarmouth that we will, and let me back up, the rules and regulations as they're being revised, as you know, involve revisions to Title V, the code for dealing with septic systems, and putting additional requirements on homeowners in terms of the kind of system that will meet the state requirements. And then there is another set of rules and regulations that are being updated dealing with watershed permits for municipalities. So in our case, in the town of Yarmouth, our hope is that once we get approval from town meeting, or we're hoping we'll get approval by town meeting, that we'll be in a position where we can apply for a watershed permit for the town's plans to for building phase one. And then in doing so, we would qualify for a waiver of the proposal to upgrade individual septic systems in these so-called designated nitrogen sensitive areas. And I'm assuming that you've been briefed on the nitrogen sensitive area designations and what that might entail. And for the homeowners that find themselves living in a nitrogen sensitive area, if the town of Yarmouth isn't pursuing a comprehensive plan and applying for a watershed permit, then homeowners that live in those areas are going to have to upgrade. And those costs for those wastewater systems can be even greater, particularly the monitoring costs as well. So our hope is in Yarmouth, we're successful at town meeting next month, and then we will apply for a watershed permit. And then for those homeowners that might find themselves in a situation where they need financial help in hooking up, we have a financial program available for them. So if you're less than 120% of the area median household income, you qualify for a 0% loan. If you're between 120 and 180% area income, there's a 2%. This is all on the flyer that's on the screen. And then if you're greater than 180%, the percentage rate that you'll be qualified for is 4%. Now, so just about all residential septic systems qualify for the 4% loan. And our hope is by expanding and offering a variety of options, more and more people can qualify for the 0% loan. There are some conditions, obviously. If you're affected in some way by the regulations, then the new regulations, once they're promulgated, then you'll certainly be able to qualify for help. That's almost immediate. And then obviously for the project, typically for a sewer connection, it's the sewer connection cost. It's the cost for literally going from the sewer line that passes your house, directly connecting the sewer line to your home and getting it connected to the sewer system. And then you're also covered in any costs that relate to dismantling or removal of the septic system itself. So in some cases, that would be necessary. So that's just sort of a brief overview. I think one of the things that we've wanted to make sure people are aware of is that we're living in changing times, that just about everyone on Cape Cod is going to have to deal with a changing regulatory environment in which either they have to upgrade their septic system or they will have to connect to a sewer system. Now, not every town is developing their sewer system, you know, in the next few years. There's some towns like Yarmouth that have multiple phases, and I'll leave that to Jeff to go into. But this program is a very important one. We get a lot of state support for it. Actually, the dollars that we get that we reloan are from the state's revolving loan fund program. And I will say that the program is run very efficiently, it's very well managed, and our default rate is incredibly low, below almost any standards for financing a program like this. So we're very proud of it, and we're glad to expand it, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
You'll be talking at the town meeting about this fund?
That's very interesting. I'm not sure exactly what the presentations are going to look like. I think that's up for discussion right now, but there are some people that think it's important that we advertise the availability of the assistance, that we do more. So to your point, are we going to be trying to do more to get the word out on it? Yes, we are.
Because if people are going to hear about the approximate costs to them personally, which I understand will be part of the town meeting presentation, I think it'd be very important to have a mention of this.
I will pass that along. I've learned I'm not in charge of who makes those decisions, but I will certainly carry that message to the rest of the team. But I think it's a good suggestion. And in between now and then, we are going to be getting the word out and through our social media and through our government TV channel.
And I would just, well, hopefully it happens that people at the meeting are going to get educated, but I just encourage you to keep it simple.
I mean, our presentation on the wastewater program.
Yeah, I mean, and just, you know, I'm looking at this, not everyone knows what a median household income is.
I
It's
understand.
something we all take for granted, that kind of language a little bit.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I actually gave you the number. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
I mean, if you happen to work or are elected to a government position, it's almost like a whole new language you got to learn. And I agree with you. Sometimes the more we tend to make things more complicated than they should be. So I'm usually a very, this is probably not how I would write the brochure, but this is what we find ourselves. I agree with you completely. The easier we can make it for people to understand, the better off we are. Well said.
Now, roughly, you know, for the average homeowner in the town of Yarmouth, you know, with maybe wife and a couple kids and a Title V that's already installed. All right, you're talking about pulling out the Title V and hooking up to the town, okay?
Mhm.
How much? Roughly,
How much is that?
yeah.
Again, the ballpark that I was quoting was 8,000 to 10,000.
8,000 to 10,000.
That's the number that we've been given. So if we're doing that in a few years, it may be a few dollars more,
Mhm.
but that's the number that's being quoted right now.
And when do you expect that to change?
Well, the thing that we're keeping an eye on is when towns are beginning to implement. See, here on the Cape, a number of towns are implementing their comprehensive wastewater plans roughly at the same time. And as you're probably aware of, there are only so many contractors that are doing this. So I think one of the advantages of Yarmouth really trying to get ahead of the game is that for the folks that might be impacted and might need help in the first phase, you know, we're anxious to get that work underway soon before a lot of the other towns on the Cape. start kicking in. So, so the sooner we get going, the sooner we get an approval, the better position that we're in. So I think those costs might have a tendency to go up a little bit, but I think that's not a bad ballpark to plan on right now. What'll happen is we'll get better estimates as we move along, and we'll be able to give people a general sense of what it might entail as we get closer to the project. This is a number that we keep looking at and reviewing on a regular basis.
The literature that accompanied this flyer said that there's an online portal for applications.
There is.
Is that something though, somebody could come in to a person and talk about the fund and apply that way?
We have an administrator that actually runs the program. We actually have a person, a human being that actually answers the phone and can speak to you. And that phone number is on our brochure, 774-330-3010. And then we do have a website. It's very easy. If you just Google Barnstable County and Aquafund, it'll bring you right to our website and page where this information is on. And much of the information is written in English so that you can understand it. We've sort of at least made it and a couple of initial cracks at writing it so you can understand it. So yes, we're available to answer any question.
All right, now after I spent 10 grand to hook up to the septic system and my septic system is out, what's the cost per month for the town to keep taking the sewage out of the,
What's the cost per month or per year?
per year? Yeah, what is it?
I'm going to let Jeff handle that. I mean, we've been working on getting updated numbers in terms of the cost. But let's say that you're a resident
Mhm.
who's hooking up, you're going to be dealing with the capital cost of the betterment. So that's going to be one cost that you need to be prepared to deal with. And our costs are going to be pretty much in line with what people are paying in other communities. So for example, in Barnstable, Barnstable has actually capped their betterment costs. I think one and Falmouth has as well. But I would say an average residence in the town of Yarmouth. Now, these costs are spread. The capital cost, the betterment cost is spread over a 30-year time frame, but your annual cost would probably be around $500.
A month?
No, that'd be annual.
Annual,
If you want
okay.
to pay that in a month, that's fine.
Well, yeah.
Now, on top of that, you'll have your annual water sewer bill. And as you know, in the town of Yarmouth, our water bills are very, very low. All right. Now, they're low because largely until recently, let's put it this way, recently we started developing and implementing an overall capital improvement program on water. So increasingly, the water rates will bear the cost, the average per customer cost of that. So we're upgrading our water system, our distribution lines. We're taking added steps to make improvements at each of the pumping stations. Some of our pumping stations haven't really been touched in years, and some of them are in pretty rough shape. So the water department, I have to commend Jeff Colby and the water department. They've done an outstanding job in sort of staying on top of that. But I would envision, I mean, I'm not making any official statements today, but I would envision we're going to be moving towards a water and sewer rate for Yarmouth residents, and you'll see one overall charge. And I would venture to say our charges are still going to be less than what you're going to pay over the bridge, but here in Yarmouth, they'll be up a bit, and they'll be more in line with the overall cost of operating our water and our sewer system. Now, those charges for the sewers will be for the folks that have hooked up. If you're not hooked up to the sewer system, then you won't have to deal with that bill until the time.
Okay, on top of the 10 grand, to get hooked up and all that stuff, you said betterment. What's the betterment tax?
Our betterment is the way in which let's put it this way, the way we're financing wastewater in Yarmouth. I don't know if you recall the town meeting that we had in 2011, but I think one of the reasons why we had difficulty winning resident acceptance of our wastewater program back in 2011 is we put pretty much the bulk of the cost of the program on the tax rate. And so that was an issue for many people who came and voted at town meeting and voted against it. They felt it very much should be a program that's sort of paid for by the users So our program is set up, it's a very user-oriented program. So if you're on the system, rather than putting the cost of it on the tax rate, what we're doing is we're putting the costs essentially towards the user. Phase one, which if you're concerned about this geographic area, and I hate to be stealing Jeff's thunder here, but the phase one is principally the commercial area from Route 28.
Oh, yeah, I
From
understand that.
one end, yeah. But in Yarmouth, there will be a portion of the cost that will be paid for by the homeowner that will be associated with the betterment. So that capital cost that's allocated per resident will be spread over 30 years. So you'll have an annual betterment charge.
Okay, so there's a tax on a betterment tax on top of the 10 grand to get this installation.
Oh, yeah, yes, that's exactly true.
Okay.
Right.
So the betterment tax is spread over 30 years. So what do you figure that's gonna be?
The
Roughly.
betterment tax over 30 years, it should be no greater than maybe $15,000.
So basically, the hookup is 10 grand plus 15 grand down the road.
That's one way to look at it. On the other hand, is if we don't do anything, you're stuck with a $50,000 charge, having to upgrade your septic system to an advanced system. So
Yeah.
that's the way I would look at it, is if I'm a homeowner and the town of Yarmouth doesn't do anything, what I'm facing in terms of costs is a $50,000 upgrade of my septic system, plus the monitoring costs that are associated with it, plus the unknowns that if there's a better technology that can do a better job of reducing nitrogen, that I may be forced to upgrade once again to a better technology and a better system. It's important to understand that some of the technologies that the state of Massachusetts will be insisting people utilize are technologies that have yet to be fully proven. So we'll be required to use the best available technology, but in some cases, if a better one comes along, you might find yourselves as a homeowner having to spend yet another $50,000. So paying for clean water is expensive, and I would bet, and in Yarmouth, the best deal would be to go with the town as opposed to doing this on your own. But that's the town of Yarmouth will have that option. If we're not interested in as a community in doing an overall comprehensive system, people can vote against the article, but then again, at town meeting, but then again, you'll be on your own. And if you live in a nitrogen sensitive area, which is virtually any place in Yarmouth south of Route 6, you're all going to be forced to upgrade your septic systems to IA systems, innovative systems that are in the neighborhood of $50,000. So you're saving a significant amount of money we are in Yarmouth by banding together as a community and working together as a community to deal with this.
It's also increasing the value of your home. It's the biggest investment many people have.
Yeah, that's a point well taken, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad you raised that. In most of the communities, just about every community that we've looked at, that investment basically is covered in the added property value of your property. Now, I've attended several of the community meetings on this topic of wastewater in Yarmouth, and what amazes me is now you have to understand, I'd go to a meeting and maybe sit in the back of the room and get ready for people to throw tomatoes at me or I've always expected these forums to be somewhat heated, but actually we've had a very positive response. I think in Yarmouth, I think we're at a point right now where the people of this community are anxious to take some action. I think people are very concerned about the quality of our waterways, the water quality of Bass River, Lewis Bay, Parkers River. They're very concerned about protecting our water supplies. That's an important component of this. That's what we're trying to do, is to make sure that we're taking steps to protect our drinking water. Some of you may be aware that in Yarmouth, we have already shut down wells because of groundwater contamination. And in the case of wells 4 and 5 that serve Yarmouth residents, they were taken offline. Why? Because of PFAS contamination. That term PFAS has become something that we've been reading about quite a bit. And that PFAS contamination, we believe, based on the studies that have been done to investigate where this is coming from, we believe it's coming from bad septic systems. So we're moving ahead with a plan to address that contamination. And And while we treat it, it's also important to provide a longer term solution in terms of preventing that pollution from getting into the ground. So that's the other benefit of developing a sewer system and a wastewater system, is that we have the ability to prevent our groundwater from being contaminated. And the reality is that the more it's contaminated, the more expensive it becomes, and the more you have a significant public health issue in the community. So what I admire about our community is that increasingly people have become not only aware, but they've become almost somewhat strident about us taking action in the town. And that's a message that I've heard loudly and clearly. I know financially, we would like to get more help financially, and we haven't stopped doing that. And the reality is that the cost that you will see reflected in the overall plan, we have done a lot of work in finding ways to get other state and federal help to bring down the cost. We've created these funds so that we can take revenue streams from other sources. And we're not going to stop looking for more money to bring down the overall cost. I think we pretty much, that's sort of an ongoing battle for us, is to find other funds to come in to keep the cost as affordable as we can possibly make it.
I mean, it's another benefit in that our town is dependent upon tourism. We need people to be coming here to be purchasing products, using the restaurants, going to the beaches, the ponds. So we need clean water for people to want to come here. So.
And live here.
And live here, yes. And I would say in the future, when we look at finding creative ways to finance these kinds of infrastructure improvements, we're going to continue to look for, the funds that typically the visitor is paying more than the year-round resident. For the year-round resident, the year-round resident has clearly their hands full, but our goal would be to find a way to spread around the costs so that the others can help step up and pay the bills, not just the Yarmouth residents. So we've been doing that, and we've had some success, and we're going to continue to keep doing that.
Anyone else, any questions or comments?
Just simply, if I could, Mark, this, congratulations on strengthening and advancing this program, because I can tell you this answers a question that is asked at the health department counter every day, multiple times a day. How do I pay for this? So we will help the messaging and letting residents know that to help to eliminate or minimize the financial barrier.
Yeah,
Here.
no, I appreciate you mentioning that, Jay. In my travels to town halls around the Cape, it's amazing exactly how much activity takes place in the health agent's office. This is a conversation that goes on all the time. And we're blessed to have health agents and health departments that are very versed in this program, very good at it, and doing a wonderful job helping spread the word. So thank you for all the information that you provide, that you get out. Thank you for helping us market this program and making people aware of it.
Well, congratulations to you on this. And it's not enough to have a good idea. You have to be able to pay for the idea. And this helps
It
the
does.
residents pay for that idea. So
It's a big,
we'll be part of that as well.
great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Great.
Mr.
Good.
Chairman, members of the board, great to be here. Thank you.
I just had one comment or one thought more than a question. And this extends well beyond my financial understanding, but I purchased a home in 2020 in Yarmouthport, and it, as a young person, was very overwhelming trying to manage the mortgage payment and property taxes and homeowners insurance on top of that. And through the Massachusetts Housing Authority, there was the opportunity to pay for some of these other things through escrow. And I presume nobody here can probably answer that question, but I just wonder if there might be an opportunity to work together. I don't know, to finance some of these things through escrow payments in the future. I don't know if anybody has thoughts or can speak to that at all, but that's kind of where my mind went when I heard about this, because taking on another payment is sort of a scary thing, you know?
Mhm.
I would agree. It is scary. But I think that's a suggestion we can certainly take back, find if there's another way to spread out the payments or make it easier for people to make the payments. like I said, the default rate is incredibly low, so people
Yeah.
have figured out a way to support the loan program now called the Aqua Fund. And but I'll certainly take that suggestion back. Thank you, Eric.
I think, Mark,
Thank you.
I think you laid it out well. Doing nothing is not an option right now. Doing
Well-
nothing is not an option. It may be individual or comprehensive. And certainly the more affordable way is a comprehensive wastewater. But to sit back and say, well, let's wait and see. The science is clear. It's only
Yeah.
getting worse.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that because you're right. The cost, doing nothing, if we basically sit on our hands and take no action at town meeting, then this financial burden is huge and far greater than what we've been talking about with the town system. So
Needs everyone's help. We need everyone's help to protect the environment.
We do.
And this is part of it. So thanks for being here.
thank you, everyone.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a discussion wastewater project update, and that's from our Department of Public Works Director, Jeff Colby. And just for the record, you could say your name. That's all for the minutes, people at home, and it's yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Jeff Colby, Public Works Director. Thank you for having me here tonight. I think Selectman Forrest did an excellent job covering some of the assistance for individuals and cost associated with connections. Certainly happy to elaborate on any of those if you have, but I'd like to take a step back and kind of look at the bigger picture with regard to the overall program, what that looks like, and hopefully address some of those bigger questions. We really have been looking to ramp up our outreach efforts. Happy to have this discussion with your board, but we've met with several of the other committees in town as well. And we're really looking to get the word out about wastewater and the April 25th town meeting with the big article for seeking construction dollars for the first phase of the program. But with that said, let me kind of walk through the presentation here. Your board is well aware of how septic systems function, but one of the things we like to start these presentations off with is what that looks like. We still find people from time to time that don't realize they have a septic system. They've moved from off Cape, they come down to the Cape, they think they might be already on sewer and they hear about that and don't realize that your septic system contributes to nitrogen pollution and also we're on a sole source aquifer, as you're well aware, and so that mixes with the water that we also use for drinking. So it's a very important concept to make sure people realize kind of what the challenge is. So I like to show this diagram on the slide that you see here, which shows the septic system and kind of how that all interacts. It also shows components with stormwater, fertilizer runoff, and there's certainly other components of nitrogen contamination beyond the septic system. But what we find is about 85% of the nitrogen pollution issue is related to septic systems. So there is a minor component associated with stormwater and fertilizer, but the vast majority is septic systems. And that's why we're looking at this program with wastewater to address that component. Also, another graphic that we like to show is just the growth that Yarmouth has experienced, all of Cape Cod really, but Yarmouth specifically here. The green area of the slide here that shows Yarmouth, that's kind of open space, natural area in the 1950s. And as you can see, the 1990s, that has been significantly more growth with the yellow and red representing different uses, residential and commercial uses within the community. And that's been about a 400% increase in population. So it really has significantly increased between the 50s and the 90s. And from 1951 to 2010, that's only continued. So that was a 722% increase in just that period. So just more people using our area and contributing to more septic system and nitrogen pollution. So the Massachusetts Estuaries Project has determined that the average amounts of nitrogen that needs to be removed in our three waterways that are contaminated is approximately 60%. It's 59.5% in Bass River and about 96% in the Parks River watershed. That's almost every septic system in that watershed needing to be removed. and about 80% in the Lewis Bay watershed. So those are pretty high numbers that we need to get the septic systems offline into a central treatment, more advanced treatment in order to address the problem is the bottom line. What I will say about this is there are some other components with regards to flushing. We just completed the Parkers River Bridge project on Route 28. That does help, but that's only a relatively small percentage of reduction in the number of septic systems that need to be removed. It's not the only answer. It's one part of the solution, but I like to mention that because it is a component that the town is taking on in addition to a centralized wastewater treatment that's also helping. And it does mean that ultimately there may be a few properties less that need to be sewered to address the issue. So it is saving the town money. We like to show these graphics as well, just so people realize, you know, what we're talking about when we say nitrogen pollution. What do you mean? What does that mean? Well, it means we're over nutrifying the waters. And because of that, we get algae blooms, uses up available oxygen in the water. We get fish kills. So we do like to show what that means for people. And we do, as was mentioned earlier when Selectman Forrest was presenting, we are in a resort area. We do have people that come here for clean water, that that live here and want to recreate in those spaces. And then certainly we want to clean up and address these issues. This is a picture just from last year, July 7th, 2022 on the Bass River. So as was referenced by Selectman Forrest, there are some new DEP draft regulations that are out there requiring innovative alternative systems to address the issue. But certainly if towns move forward with a plan like I'm talking about tonight with the overall wastewater plan, they will be able to apply for a watershed permit, and residents would be able to avoid installing these innovative alternative septic systems. And as Selectman Forrest mentioned, those are in the $50,000 to $60,000 range to put in one of those systems. I've got a recent quote from a large installer here on Cape Cod, and that's the range of costs they're seeing for innovative alternative septic systems. So they are quite expensive. And that's just the installation costs. That's not the quarterly monitoring or any of the ongoing yearly costs associated with that. So the thing to hammer home here is that community-wide wastewater program is less costly to homeowners than the individual septic system upgrade. So we did talk earlier about some of the individual costs, and those three costs we want to make sure people are clear on are a betterment cost, a connection, bringing your pipe to the street, to the sewer main the town's putting in, as well as user fees. So there will be costs associated with using the system, just as there is for water. It will be dependent on how much water you use. So if you use less water, you'll have a lower bill associated with that. But those are the three costs we want people to be aware of as far as individual costs. And if you have questions, we can, certainly talk about that. I don't want to just throw a lot of information at you without your opportunity to ask questions. So please feel free to interrupt me as we go. I really do want this to be kind of a dialogue. There's a couple of things I want to talk about at the end about how the Board of Health can certainly help in the overall program. But any of these slides, if they trigger any questions, please ask as we go.
At the town meeting, not everyone's going to know what a betterment is. So once again, it's educating people on what we're trying to do and just the language. I know it said that already tonight, but that's not everyone's going to know that, or what a IA system is, what is an innovative alternative system.
Certainly, I can
Many of
cover.
us won't have a clue what that is.
Right. I can cover both of those. Innovative alternative system is a system that's designed to remove nitrogen. Some of them also can remove other components, but the primary concern on Cape Cod is nitrogen. So those are systems that are, again, very costly, as I mentioned before, but they do remove nitrogen, not nearly as effectively as a municipal centralized wastewater treatment facility that removes almost all of the nitrogen, whereas a septic system, innovative alternative septic system might be more of a, remove about 40% or maybe half of the nitrogen, but it certainly falls short of the nitrogen removal goals we have as a community. But it is a tool in the tool belt, if you will, and that's what DEP is requiring that communities do if they don't have a central solution, if you will. So it's an advanced septic system. Hopefully that answers that question. As far as a betterment, we'll have a better graphic here in a couple of slides, but it is a portion of the funding of the program overall. As Selectman Forrest mentioned, this is a user focused financing program for wastewater versus the property tax program that was previously discussed back in 2011. And because of that, component is the betterment. And what a betterment is, just it's a definition that your property is bettered by a particular piece of infrastructure. You can have a betterment for water main. You can have a betterment for sewer. You could have a street betterment if your road was bettered or improved or paved, or drainage betterment. So it just means that your property is better because of some public infrastructure that was installed. Now there is a target on this particular program, and again, there'll be a better graphic in a couple of slides here, but the betterments are being limited to 15% of the total program. So we're not looking to spend or to pay for the whole program on using a betterment, but it is a component of the financing that'll help pay for the overall program.
Thank you.
So this is an environmental project, as I've just gone through, but it does have economic benefits. I won't focus too much on this particular slide for your committee, but this is a component when I met with other committees that were much more focused on the economic benefits that we're very interested in. But there is a study that was done back in 2018 by the Donahue Institute. It's on our website, and it does show that there's a pent-up redevelopment demand in Yarmouth that exceeds $100 million. So it's certainly going to have some benefits when we have that wastewater infrastructure available. The benefit I think that most people are going to appreciate is that we've had a dwindling commercial tax base in this community for a number of years, and that means that the taxes are more on the shoulders of the residents when there's less commercial components associated with that. In fact, the number that I just most recently heard from our finance committee, which is very interested in this slide and kind of the economic impacts, is that only 6% of the taxes are paid for by businesses. So if we provide an opportunity, which we will through this wastewater program, for businesses to redevelop their property, to improve their property, we will see a shift of that tax burden going more towards the businesses and less on the residents. So that's certainly a benefit I think everyone should be well aware of, as well as that part of our financing tool is that last bullet, which is the new growth associated with this project will be approved through a district improvement financing program. It just essentially means that growth in that district, and it's in the district of phase 1, you'll see a map in a moment, that growth associated with that will help fund the program as well. So as I mentioned before, it really is a user-focused funding program that as properties are improved, that taxes, if you will be reserved for the wastewater program. So that's in short what that means, and it does help fund the overall program. So with that said, there is a series of land use controls as the way we're going to manage the growth associated with this program. We're in the process of developing those controls, and they need to be approved. In fact, they're a critical component of the state's DEP's revolving loan fund program. So all of this is going to be through borrowed money from the state Clean Water Trust. And because of that, they require that the town have land use and growth control regulations in place, which we have a draft of, and we're in the process of reviewing with the Water Resource Advisory Committee, and then ultimately the Board of Selectmen will sign off on that. And because of that, that means we had to commit to a particular flow that we will not exceed. They don't. They want to make sure that we're not having uncontrolled growth that's controlled to a certain flow, a certain amount. And for Yarmouth, that's 3.54 million gallons a day. With that said, that means there's about 725,000 gallons per day of additional flow that people can use for when they redevelop their property, particularly in that commercial stretch along Route 28 or potentially add a bedroom, that type of thing. So there is additional flow. It's relatively minor in the overall scope of flow for the program, but we do want people to know there is a component of the program that will allow some additional flow that will be treated at the wastewater treatment plant in the overall program. So a lot of people have heard, because it was 4 years of time in which we explored the Dennis Harwich Yarmouth, also known as the DHY program. People might hear a little bit about that. We were working with the communities of Dennis and Harwich to do a centralized treatment plant and a combined program, if you will. But because of some delays associated with our other partners and those communities not necessarily being on the same pace of a program that we have developed here in Yarmouth, in August of 2021, the Board of Selectmen decided to go in the direction where the town of Yarmouth would have our own wastewater treatment facility here, at least for the first phase of the program, for phase one. And we'll look at opportunities after we get that off the ground as to whether we can continue to work with Dennis or potentially even Barnstable in some of the different wastewater programs and elements going forward. It could involve effluent recharge. It could involve treatment. I think there's some good opportunities, but we really need to start and get phase one off the ground. And at that point, we might have some opportunities to work with neighboring communities. We've had a number of recent accomplishments with the wastewater project, and we wanted to identify those. Back in 2020, the annual town meeting appropriated just over $5 million for design and engineering and permitting of the collection system, the pipes in the road, in the ground, the pump stations associated with those pipes. In 2020, at the special town meeting, the Municipal Water Infrastructure Investment Fund was approved, and that was a 0.78 property tax surcharge that was a repurposing, if you will, of the CPA funds that were being used at that time. So that was really just moving funds around to cover, and it's one, you'll see it in the chart in a moment, but it's one of the funding sources, one of the tools involved with funding for the overall program. In 2021, the annual town meeting established a wastewater enterprise fund. So now we have a place to put available funds if there's available free cash or other grant funds and a mechanism to run the wastewater system with its own separate enterprise fund. In 2021, at the annual town meeting, was also appropriated $4.5 million for design, engineering, and permitting of the treatment facility. So now with that particular article, all the design funds and permitting funds were approved for the project. Also in 2022, at the annual town meeting, the Wastewater Infrastructure Stabilization Fund was created, and that was a place for us to park the short-term rental tax revenue and separate it from the general fund revenues to help build that element up to pay for the initial years of the program. So one of the important elements with regards to the project is pre-funding, making sure you're building up a relatively large bank in advance of the construction so that we have a way of paying those initial debt services before we have users on the system. Then in 2022, at the annual town meeting, we also established the District Improvement Financing Program. I mentioned that before, but that's where we're capturing the new growth to pay for elements associated with the wastewater program within that first phase of the Yarmouth program. Another important permitting milestone was the notice of project change with DEP was approved back in September of 2022, so just this past year, and that really set us up with regards to our permitting requirements. Then in January of this year, the intended use plan, which is from the state's revolving loan fund program, as I mentioned before, that's where we're going to borrow all the money from to pay for the program. We were ranked as the #1 program project in all of Massachusetts. So there's certainly a recognition from the state that we have a very important and critical component. One of the there's a number of reasons why you get ranked #1, but one is certainly a need within the community. The other one is the environmental importance, being a program that's going to remove nitrogen and certainly improve the water quality. That's a high consideration for that ranking. The town has also hired consultants to work with that district improvement financing program as well as the betterment program. So we're bringing in the support we need to develop these programs. So what does that overall program look like? Here is the 8-phase map. I think you heard earlier that essentially it's just about every area south of Route 6, but a little bit north as well within that Bass River watershed needs to be addressed in order to meet our nitrogen removal goals. In order to do so, we need to figure out a plan of, what areas are we going to do and how we're going to do that. The best way to do that is an 8-phase program, which is about 5 years per phase. So it's a 40-year program. That has been approved by DEP. That was part of that notice of project change I mentioned earlier. So DEP has signed off on this program with regards to how long it's going to take and what areas we do. This is subject to change at least for phases 2 through 8. Phase 1 is locked in. We're committed. We know that's going to be the corridor here on Route 28, portion here of like Old Main Street, as well as South Shore Drive. That's all phase 1. That's our high flow users. That's going to get users in the system and generating revenue and paying for the program going forward very quickly. That also happens to be the backbone of the system. We call that the spine, if you will, because that's the pipe in which the other phases will flow into and make it easy in which to connect the future phases. What I like to say is you won't have phases 2 through 8 if you don't do 1, because everything flows into that phase 1 pipe, if you will. So drilling down a little bit more, this is what the phase 1 map looks like. Everything that's more brightly colored is phase 1. Again, that's Route 28, Old Main Street, as well as South Shore Drive here. The treatment plant, very centrally located here, is broken into what we're calling contract 1. It's a very big project. It's a $207 million project, construction cost. And because of that, we have to break that into manageable chunks. And in doing so, we did that with 6 different contracts. Contract 1 is the treatment plant at 99 Buck Island Road, right behind the water department offices. There's already a spray irrigation field there associated with the septic facility. So there is a component of effluent recharge that's happening at that site already. And then we have contracts 2, which is this yellow area here. Contract 3, which is the green area. Contract 4 is being done in conjunction with Mass DOT. That's up here at the intersection with North Main Street and Old Main Street and Route 28, as well as the Bass River Bridge project. Mass DOT is doing that project, and Yarmouth will participate in paying for the pipes associated with water and sewer improvements. But because we're doing it with them, we'll save significant money with regards to repavement, repaving the road and putting things back together. That'll be part of their project. We're also looking to do contract 5, which is the orange area here, a fairly long stretch that's from Parkers River Bridge to the Barnstable Town Line, also with Mass DOT, as long as the timing works out, which we're still in discussions with them. But that'll be another opportunity for the town to pay for the pipe as part of their project and save significant dollars. And then there's a 6th contract, which is outside of that Mass DOT work, where there are 3 pump stations, one at the drive-in site and 2 others here westerly along Route 28 that are pump stations where the gravity system will collect the wastewater and then gets those pump stations, and that's pumped back to the treatment plant here at Buck Island Road. So that's the 6 contracts associated with that. The other areas you're seeing on this particular map that are in the blue shading are just for future phases.
Just trying to picture system going in. When you're talking about a sewer pipe, what's the diameter of a sewer pipe? How big is a pipe?
So that's various sizes. It all depends on how much flow is going into the pipe. For this particular phase, there's a significant amount is 8-inch, which is a pretty typical sewer main size. The largest section is in the yellow here, mostly along Old Main Street until you get to the pumping station that's at Long Pond Drive. That is 30-inch. And the only reason that is that large because a large portion of the future phases, primarily here in the upper Bass River area, flow down into that. And because of that, probably a better graphic for that. Here we go. And because of that, all of this area flows down through that old Main Street section. So that's why it has to be a much larger pipe, 30 inches. But the rest of it, for the most part, is 8 inches, which is a pretty typical size sewer main.
What do you foresee as problems with the commercial area, for instance, the disruption of the road, of how businesses are going to handle that?
That's a great question. That's actually one of the reasons, other than having it in manageable chunks of project, as I mentioned before, but that's actually one of the reasons for phasing the contracts the way we have. And I do have a slide in a moment that will show the timing of those contracts. We want to make sure that we're minimizing disruption for sure, but also allowing for certain areas to be excavated with the pipe going in, such as contract 3 here and contract 2, getting those for the most part wrapped up before you get too far here into contract 5. So it really is a timing and phasing thing to try to minimize the amount of impact to traffic and businesses. Certainly access will be maintained for everyone along Route 28 and that commercial corridor, but it might mean that there'll be some detours in place. We'll have to be very proactive with regards to signage and notification, so people will know how to transit this corridor. It is a major corridor for the hospital, not just for Yarmouth, but also Dennis, Harwich, Chatham. They use Route 28 to get to the hospital. So this is a critical piece of infrastructure here along Route 28 that we'll have to closely coordinate to make sure that we've already had some meetings with police and fire on this topic, as well as the bus companies for schools. We need to make sure that's all continues throughout this project. So it is a large undertaking, but it's all things we're working through to make sure that there is a way to transit this corridor, even if it means you have to maybe use Old Main Street while Route 28 is being worked on. Certainly, if we can keep a road open, we will. But if not, there'll have to be a well-noticed and clear detour associated with that. So a little bit about the funding sources. I've hinted at that a couple of times, but there are roughly 10 different funding sources. And from a project standpoint, that is a great way to do a project because it provides a lot of stability. You're not relying on one particular funding source. In fact, I was talking with Jay about this earlier. With the 10 different sources, if your revenues don't quite meet your expectations in one of them, you can balance that with the others, or you might have a couple that exceed your revenue expectations. So because of that, having a variety of different funding sources makes a lot of sense. To quickly cover what those look like, again, emphasizing this is outside the property tax levy. These are all outside funding sources. There's the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust that's providing approximately 25% of the cost of the program. That primarily comes from short-term rentals, but that's a trust that's administered by a group of Yarmouth, or not just Yarmouth, but Cape representatives. We do have a representative in Selectman Forest that represents Yarmouth on that trust, and they have given 25% subsidies to every program that's applied so far. So we're fully expecting that for Yarmouth. We've also got the Water Infrastructure Investment Fund. I mentioned that before. That was that repurposing of some of the CPA funds. There was also dedicated local short-term rental receipts. These are short-term rental receipts that come directly to Yarmouth and not to a trust to manage, but come to us. And those have been separated and put in that capital stabilization fund that I mentioned earlier to pre-fund and pay for the program's early years. There is also the District Improvement Financing Program, which captured that new growth in this commercial corridor that I mentioned before, as well as user-generated revenues. That's very similar to your water fees, as was mentioned a couple times now. There are operating charges associated with that that'll help pay for the system and development of the program, as well as betterments. We talked about that, but that's coming from individual users of the system who have the ability to hook up. You won't have a betterment until you have the pipe in front of you and you're available to hook up. So for us, we're talking about primarily phase 1 now. If you're in phase 5, 6, or 7, it will be 20, 25 or 30 years from now, but that is a component of paying for the program only when that pipe's available to you, when you're in that particular phase. What was approved at the previous town meeting, and I didn't mention in one of the previous slides, is the betterment program has been extended to 30 years. So that's a nice feature that the town has already adopted, that if you have a cost associated with that betterment, which we're thinking is about $5,000 per bedroom, approximately $15,000 for a 3-bedroom home, if you will. But that can be spread over 30 years. So that's the basis of what some of the numbers that Selectman Forrest mentioned before is it's as low as it is because you can spread that over 30 years. Also, a nice feature of a betterment as well is that can be passed on to a future homeowner because you're only paying for that every, once a year, and it goes over 30 years. If you sell your house in 5 years or 10 years, it moves on to the next homeowner. It's something that's it goes with the property and not necessarily the owner, if you will. As well as we're pursuing state and federal grants for the project. Just this past week, we applied for the MassWorks grant for $14 million. So there's a number of different programs available, and we're going to keep looking and seeking those out that can help us pay for this program. Also, one of the pieces I should mention, and you'll see it on I think one of the next slides here with regards to the chart. Yeah, let me go to that chart. And I don't want to miss this piece, the state revolving fund loan forgiveness. So as I mentioned before, we're borrowing all of this money to do the project from the Clean Water Trust, from DEP's program they have for doing these type of wastewater projects. We've already been awarded a 6.6% debt forgiveness, which means they're not going to require us to pay back that part of the principal. It's a direct grant, if you will. But we are in line for more because of our ranking as #1 on that program that I mentioned before. So for all those reasons, we expect to exceed a lot of the expectations with regards to these revenue components. But this is a good graphical representation of kind of our funding sources and what that looks like. I know a lot of people like to see these. We've already talked about many of these pieces. The betterment's really funding only about 15% of the program. The Cape Cod Water Protection Trust funding about 25%. Here is that CPA repurposing of the funds. That was 0.78, but over time it does it does represent a pretty large slice of the pie, if you will. We also have some solar revenues we're dedicating to this program. That's what this gray piece of the pie is. We've already talked about the short-term rentals that are coming directly to Yarmouth, funding a good piece with that orange slice. Debt forgiveness has already been mentioned. The district improvement financing funding about 6% of the program here in that peach color, and then the O&M surcharge again at about another 15%. So that's where you get these variety of funding sources, that roughly 10 different sources that are really helping to fund this whole program, spreading that cost out, if you will. So with that said, here's what the next steps look like. We are already designing the system. As I mentioned before in one of the previous slides, we have all the funding in place for both design of the collection system, the pipes, as well as the treatment plant that's going to treat the effluent. And that design is underway and should be completed later this year. We have some components that are already completed, such as contracts 2 and 3. The design work for that is done. We're actually getting ready to advertise and bid those 2 pieces of the program out. But we do expect that the treatment plant will be completed, the design will be completed later this year, and then we'll look to bid that out as well. So we are on a pretty aggressive timeframe to get this done, I think, for a number of different reasons. One, Selectman Forrest mentioned earlier, the sooner we can get out to market with these projects, the better I think we will be with competing for available contractors to do the work, but also the timing of things. We've seen a lot of construction prices increasing very quickly over the last couple of years, and the sooner we can get out to bid and capture those prices sooner rather than later, it'll be less money. We'll have less of the escalation in project cost to experience there. It's important to know that with the 6 contracts broken up here, here's the timing. This chart is an important one I like to show. We're really looking at starting construction, so having the design finished for the treatment plant later this year and starting construction in February of 2024. We're looking for a completion of all these different contracts, all 6 of these, by June of 2026. So you can see all the critical dates up there. I won't read all of them to you, but there is a staggering of those for several of the reasons we mentioned before, to minimize construction impacts, to not have all the areas under construction at the same time, as well as to try to take advantage of contractor availability. There are a limited number of contractors out there, so if we can stagger the construction, we can, maybe keep a couple different contractors busy as they're finishing up one phase. They can, as one set of contracts, they can maybe move on to another. So we've taken into consideration kind of all those different elements when we're figuring out the timing of these contracts.
As for the timing of it, we're looking at 40 years for it to be completed.
For the entire program, right? That's about 2/3 of the town of Yarmouth. So it's a big town. That would be a lot of work to undertake. So it's manageable chunks again. In 5 years, that's roughly 2 years for design of each phase and then 3 years of construction. And in over 5 years, 8 phases, 40 years to get the whole program done. So what most of this presentation has really just been focusing on that first phase, which we're well underway with design, actually almost complete with design, 3 years of construction, and then we'd be looking to get into the second phase after that.
What I'm thinking is that by the system is completed, some parts of the sewer system will be 40 years old. What's the life expectancy of a septic system, rather of a sewering system?
It's the pipe in the ground should be between 50 and 75 years. So we should be complete well before we have to think about rehabilitating sections of the pipe.
Okay.
But that is a consideration, and it's being built into the operations and maintenance cost projections that we have. So that's another component of the program, which I didn't even cover tonight, but we're figuring what those costs might look like going forward. Bill Scott and Bob Rittenauer have done a great job in kind of analyzing what those look like for the whole program, all 8 phases, and that's being taken into consideration.
The other thing over this period of time, I mean, the world's changing, and if you're thinking whether water levels change or temperatures changing, which is affecting a lot of things, or we hear a lot more in the news now about problems potentially with a power grid for a variety of reasons, unfortunately. So what's being done in the plan to look that far down the line of what things that could occur? I know, think about the problem. There's a problem in P-Town with their system there, that something occurred. So what are some of the things in design that we should think about?
That's a great question. We are considering sea level rise in these. Some of the pump stations will have to be elevated higher than most of the other structures that are along this area, just because they were built using some older building codes, and now we have required to use the newer building codes. So we have elevated pump stations that will be taken into consideration. In areas that are more prone to flood, we'll have to look at gasketed manhole covers, potentially bolted down gasketed manhole covers. So there's plenty of considerations with regards to, what that looks like to, build in some redundancy within the system as well, making sure that, when there's an opportunity to have multiple pumps available or a backup, that, that's certainly a consideration. Because you'd also mentioned, we're considering, sea level rise, but we're also taking a look at, making sure we have a pretty robust system, that if the power goes down, we have generators available, both at the treatment plant as well as pump stations, trying to minimize the number of pump stations, because obviously you have a potential generator need at those. And if you have a lot of different pump stations, you get a lot of different, generators that are required. So there's 5 pump stations as part of this first phase, and future phases we'll have to take a look at that, seeing what we can, minimize, because it's not only operational cost, but making sure that you have a resilient system.
Thank you.
So we're looking at a lot of different things. It's a very big project, a lot of moving pieces. But with that said, that really does wrap up the slides that I wanted to cover with you tonight. I do want to see if we can get a letter of support from the Board of Health for the overall program. That's pretty much what I've been asking of every committee that I present to. And we've gotten some great support letters for the program. We just want to make sure that, the voters are well aware that this is a well-supported program, of which it is. Everyone seems to have good comments and feedback with regard to the overall program. So I'd like to, hopefully get a letter of support from your board if that's possible.
Well, we're sure you will put that on the agenda at the next meeting, about the letter and move that along.
We did that in April. We had a resolution that we submitted.
Okay, great. So maybe
we
that's
can
already done
certainly
then.
Take a
Yeah.
look at that
Yeah.
as a basis
You-
for the letter.
Jay, I mean, I haven't looked at it in a little while. Does it suffice or?
Well, it's in a proclamation kind of format and maybe a letter, a resolution. May put it in a letter format, because that's used then sometimes with writing of grants,
Absolutely,
grant support,
right.
letters of support for grants. So maybe just the format, certainly the context is there, maybe updated a little bit. It has been since April. So a little bit of time has passed, but the infrastructure, the scaffolding is there for a letter.
Maybe we could take a look at it before the next meeting, so it'll be here. We
Okay.
can talk
We
about
do.
that. That'd be great.
W-
Finished product.
One other thing, if Jeff, we just, not to go too long on it, but how the Board of Health will intersect as far as the connection policy and things like that.
Yes.
I'll just pass out to you. It just came to me today, but I've given you some information regarding policy. It was from Orleans and Chatham, but here's a one pager and I'm going to give this to you now. Eric, I will send this to you. I will email this to you. So you're flying a little bit blind on this, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the policy that the board will be asked to come up with, the regulation, I should say.
Yeah, that's a great transition. So that's the other piece I wanted to talk with the board about is your, part in this. Obviously, with the sewer system, there's going to be, connection regulations, flow control, land use controls, all those kind of components that will be managed by the sewer commissioners or by the DPW or the sewer division, those types of things. There's a lot of documents that we're currently working on and putting together, but one that we are looking for the Board of Health to participate in is just the sewer connection regulation. That just, a notice or a regulation that, lets the users know that have a pipe available in front of the street that, hey, now's the time to get off of your septic system and connect to the sewer. And the, connection and the permit for connection to the sewer gets managed by others, obviously. The Board of Health's involved in on-site septic systems, that type of thing. But because the Board of Health has already issued a permit for the on-site septic system, it's, there's a component with regard to this whole process of when you notify people that now is the time to stop using your septic system and, go on to the sewer system, and here's the process to do that. With that said, other communities have adopted a mandatory sewer connection regulation. It's again very simple. It really just cites the authority and purpose, which, as most everyone knows, that towns really don't have the authority to do things on their own. They have to do only what the state allows us, has granted us as a community to do. And under Mass General Laws, Chapter 83, Section 3, it empowers the Board of Health to order people to connect to a sewer when that pipe is available. And so that's a good, important component. But there's some other pieces to that that's really up to your discretion, like how long do they have to connect? You've certainly notified people by the authority granted to you by Massachusetts to say that you have to connect, but it's really up to you as to how long you would like people to have to do that connection. I will tell you that some communities have looked at 1 year, but most of the communities that I've taken a look at their different connection rules are usually 2 years to do that, giving people a little bit more time. 1 year is pretty aggressive. 2 might be a little bit better, but certainly that's up to your board as to how long you'd like to have. What I would suggest from an operation standpoint is there is a perspective that the sooner we can get people on board, the sooner we can have users that can help pay for the system, and we can, move on to the next phase. So we don't want to be too long, but obviously you need to consider how, what's the appropriate length of time. In most of these other connection regulations, there is the opportunity for exemptions or exceptions to that, or maybe the better way to refer to it is deferment. You'd still have to connect at some point, but do some people have a little bit longer to connect than others? One example of that might be somebody that just put in a brand new septic system. Do you want to give them a little bit longer? I did review with Bruce Murphy, a previous Board of Health direction from, back in 2011 of that. And that was certainly a consideration of this board at that time, was if you had a brand new system, giving a little bit longer. I will say that I do know that you have a few alternative septic systems in town that do remove some nitrogen, so maybe they get even a little bit longer. I think what Jay just handed out to you was the Chatham example, and in that particular community, they decided that 10 years on an alternative septic system was reasonable because it's a much more significant cost associated with that, and it is also removing some amount of nitrogen. Maybe not as much as we'd like, or working quite as well as we'd like, but owners could have a little bit longer if they had one of those systems. Now, you might find that people are very interested in getting off those types of systems because of maintenance cost and that type of thing. And maybe they would do it sooner, but they would certainly be given a little bit more if your board felt that was appropriate. Another component is, what are they going to do with the septic system? Is that something you're going to simply allow them to pump and fill with sand and abandon in place? Or do you want to have a requirement where it's completely removed? My recommendation, because it's what most communities have done, is just a proper abandonment if would be available to people, because that would be the cheapest, most cost-effective way. And if somebody decided they wanted to fully remove their septic system because they wanted to put an addition on their house or to put in a swimming pool, that would be their choice. But that would be a more significant cost if you were to require that of everyone. So most communities have just come down on the side of proper abandonment of their system in place is the way to go. So those really are the major components. The last component that I'll mention that really is up to your board is there a penalty associated with that? Chapter 83, Section 11 of the Mass General Laws allows for a fine of up to $200 if the Board of Health decides that was appropriate incentive, if you will. If people decide they don't want to connect, you have the ability to levy fines if they decide they don't want to. So what's been handed out to you is Chatham's. They've decided that the fine of $200 would be appropriate, but I'm not aware they've ever used that. So really, it would just be an incentive in there that we would hope would never need to be used. But with that said, those are the really, 4 or 5 particular items that I think the Board of Health could help with regards to requiring people to connect to a sewer.
How about businesses connecting to the sewer?
I would suggest that this would apply to everybody. I had mentioned probably several times now residences, but it would really be all users of on-site septic systems. We'd like the flow, we'd like the users, and we know that the centralized treatment plant can remove more nitrogen, as I've mentioned a couple of times, and we'll do a better job at doing that. I will say that our town administrator and assistant town administrator have been regularly meeting with the business community along that phase 1, I think on a weekly basis, and they're all very anxious to connect. So I think you'll find that there's less concern about connecting within the business community, but that's certainly an important component we want to make sure gets connected.
So you think that 2 years, for example, would allow for enough flow for you initially?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, we have a pretty sizable first phase, and I think we're going to find a large number of people want to connect as soon as they can. So this really is, what's the final people you want to connect. And I would say that 2 years out, we'd get plenty of flow within that first year, people just wanting to connect quickly, And these also feed into the frequently asked questions. So when we do outreach sessions or in advance of town meeting, when people ask questions, we want to make sure we're giving them good input as far as what the Board of Health would require. So you certainly don't need to adopt this right away, but it would be good in order to answer questions, what direction you might be leaning towards on some of these items.
So what's your time frame on that?
It would be good to get a feel for what your thinking is on those different items I covered as soon as reasonable. Within the next few weeks would be helpful.
Thank you.
Again, we don't need to have it, a regulation enacted. You probably have a procedure for that with public hearings and public notice, but I think it would be helpful for people to know, what they need to do with their existing septic system, how long they have to connect generally. Those are the types of questions we get pretty regularly. People's questions about this aren't so much on the information I covered about what the details of the system are. They want to know what their individual impacts are.
Mr. Chairman. Erica has a question.
Can I ask a question?
Sure you can.
Yeah, anytime.
Okay, so a lot of questions that we having at the front desk in the health department is about having bedrooms and getting rid of deed restrictions. If they hooked up to this system, because usually the septic, that's what's based on how many bedrooms you could have. So now that they're gonna get hooked up, it was like, okay, would this allow us to have bedrooms? And also get rid of the deed restriction on only having this amount of bedrooms?
The short answer is possibly. I don't know how many deed restrictions are out there and what that would mean for the overall available flow. As I mentioned in the presentation, there's about 725,000 gallons per day that's available. And a bedroom would be relatively small amount of that, right? It's about 110 gallons per day. So, for the most part, there's available flow and it would just depend on, the process in which to get that flow and approve for that flow. Ultimately, that flow approval goes through the sewer commissioners, which are the Board of Selectmen, and we're working on what that process looks like. So I do want people to know there is available flow that we're building into the system, but I wouldn't say there's any guarantee for that flow.
Also the issue residential versus commercial for sure.
I have a question on the pie chart.
Sure.
You've got MassWorks at the very top, 0%. What is that?
Well, that's more or less a placeholder because that is one of the grant programs that we have already applied for. We just haven't heard back that we've been awarded that. We've really applied for that within the last week or two. And if that comes in as we've requested for $14 million, that's a pretty good chunk of the pie that we can't bank on quite yet, but we hope to.
And the SRF forgiveness, 6.91% of the loan amount has been forgiven. And I know we've talked about 0%, but we don't know that we have that yet. Is that correct? With interest on the loan?
Right. We've been told that as part of that state revolving fund that we are eligible for the 0%. And we are eligible for that debt forgiveness. There is one piece that we still have to submit, and that's that land use controls that we're working on. So as long as we get that in, and we fully expect that we will, and it gets approved, we will be eligible for both of those items. In addition, some additional debt forgiveness as well is to be expected. We won't hear about that until about the June timeframe, but we do know 0% and the 6.6% SRF debt forgiveness are available to us now.
Anyone else? Questions? Eric?
I have a few technical type questions, just for my own curiosity. What's the material of the pipe, the discharge pipe, the mains, the sub mains? And what would happen in a situation where the discharge pipe is below the grade of the main or sub main coming in on that street? Would a pump be required in order to effectively discharge the effluent out to the street? And if that's the case, what happens in the case of a power outage?
All good questions. The material of the pipe is typically PVC, so very similar to what a septic system piping would be, but it would be rated to be more like Schedule 80 versus what might be allowed in some backyards, if you will. But it's PVC. It's very long lasting. There are certain circumstances where it might need to be ductile iron. Force mains are a good example of that. Also very, very shallow, which we don't have any designed in the system yet, but very shallow pipe would typically be ductile iron because it's a little bit more rigid and has more strength associated with that. But for the most part, it's PVC for the pipe. And your question about the pump, yes, if the pipe out of the house is lower than the main, they would need to pump up to it, but that is not the case for any of the properties that I'm aware of. We've taken a painstaking approach to find out what everybody's septic system, where it's located, what the elevations are relative to the top of foundation is the benchmark they're using, and making sure the pipe is low enough to accomplish a regular gravity connection. Also, because we're putting in the, as I mentioned before, the backbone of the collection system, that typically is low anyway, because all of the other phases of program need to flow into it and primarily by gravity. So it's a pretty deep pipe, which is a consideration for construction impacts and that type of thing. But it does mean that pretty much everyone, at least in this first phase, will be a gravity connection. Was there another question there too that I might have missed?
No, I think you got it all.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So grinder pumps, what are they?
It's a great question. We've been able to avoid that for the first phase, as I've just kind of mentioned before. But there's very likely to be sections in future phases within Yarmouth that are so low that we're not able to serve by gravity, just the very high groundwater areas. I'm thinking of some areas, particularly south of Route 28, where you're seeing the mounded septic systems now. It's very likely some of those areas are going to need grinder pumps. That's really a component of a low pressure system, which just pumps directly from the house into the nearest gravity connection, if you will. So it might be a whole neighborhood, not just one house, that might all have to have grinder pumps that feed together that then pump into the gravity system at the top of their street, that type of thing. So there will be a need for that at some point in the future, but that's not needed as part of this first phase. We'll have to figure out also what the rules and regulations are as it relates to that. And that's a whole nother discussion that most communities have when they've gone into that direction, you know, who owns the pump, who maintains the pump, you know, all those types of questions, but we're able to avoid that in this first phase.
And do they run on electricity?
They do. So I think that might have been the other question
Yes.
that was
Thank
mentioned
you.
too. Because we're able to avoid pumps, we don't have in this first phase, we don't really have much of a consideration for that, but it is a consideration when you get into those other phases with regards to the grinder pumps, because when you lose power, they don't operate. So we found that some people put in generators or maybe already have a generator that can help. But the town also needs to think about when we get into large areas of grinder pumps, do we need to have our own generator, portable generator we're bringing around to help people out? If it's a multi-day power outage, it's definitely a concern. That's why I would say, in my mind, a gravity connection and a gravity system is certainly the Cadillac, if you will, the best of a sewer system. But I think there's areas, I know there's areas we just can't avoid that issue, but it will come up and we'll have to work through what all those policy decisions are when that happens.
Beyond our time, probably.
That's right, future phases.
So you're not going to stay on to completion of the project then?
I don't think I will be here in 40 years, right?
Okay, all right. I appreciate your honesty.
I don't know
about
how
that.
long I'll be here, but it probably won't be 40 years.
At least not worrying about wastewater.
Right.
Most of us won't know what it is.
Yeah,
At that
so I'm
point.
happy to come back and have further discussions about this as we start to roll out future parts of the program. But I think this was a great opportunity to look at least at this first phase, and especially in the lead up to town meeting.
Yeah, great presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Great. All right.
For those, Jeff, if you just remind the residents at home, the question is on for the town meeting on April, right, 25th?
It's
And what's the article number?
It's Article 18. We'll see that on some of the outreach literature that we'll be doing, but Article 18, it's for $207,244,000. And it is at Mattakese Middle School on April 25th at 6 o'clock.
And a yes vote allows the town to move forward in a positive direction, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
To construct the waste treatment plant.
That's right. And the collection system associated with phase one.
Well, thank you for being here, Jeff.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Number 4 here on the agenda, and this is an update on coronavirus.
Okay.
I believe that's to my left.
It is. We'll roll through this fairly fast. A lot of information's been coming at you, but we do have some good news here. Looking at the active number of cases, there are 12 in town right now. Again, as we inch closer to 6,000, just under from the start of this, going back into March 11th of 2020. But 11 active cases, positive cases that are in town now. Dramatic drop over the months here, as you can see. Monthly cases dropped in half in February. Very positive news there. We hope it continues to decline, but you can see that we're pulling out of this very strongly. Another good sign. Here's a number that we haven't seen for quite some time. Yarmouth's positivity rate, 6.33, has dropped down. And it really, quite frankly, across the whole Cape, you don't even see double digits. So some communities being up in, 10, 12, even higher. Every town across the Cape is now under 10. So maybe we're seeing a migration across the whole Cape, but certainly Yarmouth is well positioned and moving in the right direction. It's lower week over week, or 2 weeks over 2 weeks as we meet, and it's been reported. Okay. Vaccinated numbers are not those are fairly stagnant, and I don't think at this stage we're going to see too much. We certainly still encourage, but we haven't seen a lot of movement in that direction. 80% of the population and fully vaccinated. Those numbers across every community have been fairly stagnated. And second booster, same. We've been at 26% for quite some time. This is now the second booster vaccine. But it's just good for the board to see, and for the community to be updated on what the vaccine numbers are. Here, this gives you a good comparison of where Yarmouth has been since, let's see, the end of January, 10.54, now down to 6.33, and just looking at those numbers in 2 week intervals, how we have dropped down, and then also the last 3 columns at the bottom where we compare to the state and to the county, less than half. Continually, we look and encourage individuals, if you haven't already, to get vaccinated. So the Massachusetts website, the COVID-19 vaccine availability, they have a website as far as Vaccine Finder, COVID-19 Vax Finder. So Vaccine Finder. So we encourage individuals to go on and look at that. We also have some local places. Go ahead, Erica. Vaccinations at Cape Cod Healthcare, and that's the 27 Park Street in Hyannis, 508-862-7000, and you schedule for that Monday through Saturday. Okay, and then certainly our local businesses still providing, although you have to register and you do have to register an appointment, but CVS, Stop and Shop on Long Pond, and Walgreens all still dispensing vaccine shots. Testing, the vast majority, although we don't really it's all anecdotal, we can't really delineate or define the numbers. Vast majority of the testing is being done at home, but there is testing that is available. 25 Communications Way in Hyannis, and that can be scheduled certain now 508-534-7103. Kits are we still have an inventory here that are at the town hall, the senior centers, the libraries, the pantries, throughout the whole community, anywhere where the community intersects, we're providing those. and on a regular basis, they're going out the door. Although I have to tell you, we haven't exhausted, but we're we're depleting, nearing depleting our inventory on kits, but that's a good thing. They're getting into the homes where people can use them. And the mask advisory is still in place, although we're getting closer to the number where perhaps the board would give some deliberation to dropping that advisory, but we're certainly not there yet.
Why not?
And suspected cases, this is on influenza, and there's an interesting number for March, 0 so far. So you can see that influenza, the season of influenza, it varies from year to year. I don't know if it's about the effectiveness of the influenza shot or not, but certainly those are very encouraging numbers as we move towards some warmer weather. 6 in February and 0 in March so far. And what else do you have for me, Erica? That's all you have. Erica, I can't thank you enough. So just so the board knows, all the PAC information, all the PowerPoints, everything, the information that is put together, that is Erica's hard work, and she does it thanklessly, seamlessly, and just in such a timely manner. I can't thank you enough, Erica, for all the work that you do. Seriously, great job. And Erica, please know, at any point you ask a question, you're on the front line on this. You know this from the inside. You write points on so many of these issues. I shouldn't be speaking of you, Mr. Chairman, but I'm assuming the board would want to hear what,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Speak up.
Absolutely.
Okay. New and old business. Anyone have any?
Mr. Chairman, just our board members. We have a Deborah.
Right. I can mention that for attendance quickly, but yes, Deborah stepped down.
I didn't hear that. Okay, you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I did.
just-
Okay.
Yeah, that I heard about 3 days ago. I forwarded to everyone. So that's it. Is in effect over the weekend.
Do
So
we have some applications for the Board of Health on hand? I mean, I know the applications for the boards and committees are always open. So do we have?
I'm sorry, Mary, do we have any active candidates?
Mhm.
Not that I know of. So I received this on Friday, I believe, Friday afternoon. I have sent this up to the town administrator's office to then work through the process. But I will get that to you certainly before the next meeting, to see if in fact there are any candidates.
any other new or old business?
Director of the Health Department? What's going on with that?
So I have been asked to take over as a director of public health. There is an interval at time where Bruce Murphy will be using up his vacation time. He's not in the office now. He's on vacation as of March 10th. And after through April, he then finishes his tenure with the town, and I'll take over as director of public health.
Okay, so you accepted it. You were offered it.
I did.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Appreciate the board. Thanks.
Welcome
Thank you.
aboard. That's great.
I have,
And what's happening then with having someone assist you in this?
Yeah.
So we have an opening.
We do have
Assistant director.
we do have an opening, Mr. Chairman. I think they're going to look at some things first, just to see, in fact, wastewater maybe be part of those responsibilities for the assistant director. There's a portion, as you can tell from this presentation, that a role that the Board of Health or the office, the staff will play. So we may have to rewrite a little bit and widen the margins on the assistant director's responsibilities and roles. But in not too distant future, I'll be coming for the board to let you know what that is. And I expect that there'll be an advertisement and interviews, but I'll keep you posted. Nothing yet right now, too early. I do think we have to strategize, because this wastewater piece is going to be an important, the staff will be responsible for decommissioning, certifying that the septic systems, I know it's in several years still, but we have to prepare for that. We can't start in 3 years planning for that. We have to start now, what that would look like.
in the meantime, you still have septic issues that come up all the time.
every day.
Yep.
Every single day. And you know, it's wonderful. A great group of engineers, homeowners understand, they're educated on it. A lot of proactive information is done. They come down to research on a daily basis, and some individuals don't choose not to do it online, although quite a bit has been scanned in. They like to sit down and go over their plans. What are their options? They proactively, they don't jump into it. They look to see what can be done. But always the question comes up, I hear about wastewater. Should I be putting this in now? Can I get by over the next couple of years if I pump more regularly and things of that? So people are preparing and understanding and all towards, you know, the effort to protect the environment. And that's really what their focus is. So
It's also a question of your time. I mean, you certainly had the boots on out for installations, and now you have other responsibilities as well. So things are getting, I'm
Yeah.
sure, pretty tight.
I just have to do that at the end of the day. I try to, there is a lot of work to plan. You don't just review a plan. You have to look at that. And a lot of times there's revisions, emails that have to go back and forth. I'm not complaining, just that labor just has to be absorbed, that those responsibilities just have to be absorbed. And the other piece that I did want to mention, I had a chance to talk to the chair before. Last week I met with WISAC. They were very appreciative that the board took the time to listen to their work that they're doing, and they were able to put that out into the community for residents to understand their drop-in nights, the work that they'll be doing with the opioid remediation money. And that's an initiative that I think, as we work on this, we'll kind of move to in our top drawer for the Board of Health. We want to put some work on mental health, drug aware, substance abuse. I think we can make a positive impact and quality of life for a number of people in this town. So that's one of the things that I want to make sure I have time for.
You mentioned that you were doing interviews for Kevin's position, the housing inspector.
We have, the first round was done, the interviews were done last Tuesday. And we're just kind of waiting to say, that's all done through HR. I sat in on those, but I haven't heard anything back on that.
Mary, Jay, what do you think about for our next meeting, date wise?
Is it the 10th? Does that look right? The 10th of April?
Unless I was trying to look before, is it a holiday or not? Because
Well-
I was looking at the 10th also.
The night.
The 9th is.
9th is
Easter.
So, okay,
Do you do that? I don't
is that an issue or not? Have a meeting on the 10th? I don't, for anyone.
want to go to the next week. You know, the,
Well, usually we do the first or and the third, and I will tell you that wastewater is now trying to change their meeting schedule so that they're not in conflict with ours. So
Okay,
I think we should try to keep to the first and the third if we can.
okay. So you're saying what? For what date do you think should?
I don't know what's going to be on the agenda. What do you have coming up that needs to be? We do need to, I think we need to
We-
address this,
we're going to put the letter
Yes.
the letter and
The-
also take a good look at this,
policy, the connection policy.
notice or.
I'll put a draft and we can do a little bit of that prior to, but
Right.
if we can, as we craft, it doesn't have to be the exact policy, but we have some good boilerplate, good template here to work off of. We don't have to, not starting from
No, it
scratch.
looks great.
Yeah. So I would say the letter and the connection policy would
What do you
make
think,
good
Mary?
progress.
I'm listening to you about alternate dates from the committee, that's all.
I'm just saying, so the first would be the third. And the third would be the 17th, but that's kind of getting a little close to when.
Okay, we can always change it. Let's start with the third then, if we can postpone it, we can, whatever. So at least put that in your calendars then, for the next meeting then.
Is April 3rd?
Yeah.
Well, timing wise, have to have a letter out. A letter,
April 3rd,
Okay, April 3rd. Great, wonderful.
right?
and the expectation would be
Those two
having
items.
a letter of support and the connection policy
Yeah,
that would define.
Right.
I think that would be plenty.
There'll be plenty to discuss. Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Let's assume we're done with that. Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A second?
I will second.
You any discussion? No, I see not. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay,
Aye.
meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.